The Pentagon as well.
You're listening to the official Reformed Stoic podcast, covering politics, philosophy, theology, conspiracy theories. I'm ready to get to the bottom of this life. Are you? Join Wolfgang, Sketty Squad, Purity Gang, as we strive to take dominion over this dying planet. I am Reformed Stoic, and this is my podcast.
Running behind today. Let's get it. Last minute carbine hype. All right. Hopefully we can make something positive happen today, gang. Let's get it. Pentagon, Mafia and CIA, Christian parenting. Let's update the title. Get that Christian parenting in there. I managed to miss my workout today. Yeah, man, when I sleep in, sometimes it just feels like the day is happening too fast. I can't keep my schedule together. I did get a good solid 45 minutes on the drums. So, I think we might play it by ear with the Pentagon. The Pentagon, America's modern military fortress. I get sketched out about the sources. Hopefully YouTube doesn't cuck me for any of these sources. But it looks like we got an alright show to put together. So let's give it a shot, gang. Hope everybody's doing good. There's going to be a snowstorm tonight. I'm going to get so cozy tonight, guys. I think I'm just going to go ahead and say no chill stream tonight after the podcast. I just got to hurry up and get cozy, baby. And get ready for the snow. And I have not smoked any weed yet today. So, let's get it. Here comes the new segment. You're listening to the Reformed Stoic News segment. Let's go. All rockin' righty. Let's get it rolling. So we got Geographics, 928,000 subscribers. That just got me nervous. Sponsored by Conflict of Nations. Let's give it a shot. 18 minutes too. This is the sketchiest thing I've tried to get away with in a while. I'm a little bit worried about this one. The Pentagon, America's modern military fortress. All right, let's do it.
Today's video takes you inside the Pentagon, the nerve center for the modern US war machine. And if you want to lead a war machine of your very own, then great news, because today's video is
Yeah, this guy doesn't care. We're fine.
sponsored by Conflict of Nations, a free online strategy game that gathers real-time games that can take weeks to complete. The game is simple, challenging your diplomatic skills on both blow to gift you'll get in the description battle. From the outside, it looks like any other office building, albeit a very large one. The world's biggest, in fact. There's a symmetry in the architecture. 5 floors, 5 rings, 5 sides, arranged in a pentagonal shape. You wouldn't know just by looking at it that contained within its humble walls is the command apparatus for the most powerful military that the world has ever seen, the United States Department of Defense. The words the Pentagon have become shorthands for American military power, and the building itself is seen as a symbol so potent it became a target for the worst terrorist attack ever committed on US soil. But what is this building anyway? Why was it built the way it was? How does it work? And what exactly goes on within its walls? During the First World War, the War Department, at the time a cabinet department responsible for the US Army, experienced an unprecedented level of growth to meet the demands of the war effort. The department quickly ran out of space in their headquarters building, known as the State War Navy Building, because it housed all 3 government departments, and temporary buildings were put up all over Washington, D.C. Manpower didn't shrink after the war ended, and in fact, both the War Department and the Navy Department continued to expand in the 1920s and 1930s, running out of office space even in the temporary buildings that were put up 20 years before. A new building was needed, one large enough to accommodate the needs of a growing military infrastructure, commensurate with how important the United States was becoming on the world stage. A building site was chosen across the Potomac River in Arlington County, Virginia, not far from Arlington National Cemetery. The original land site chosen was in the shape of a pentagon, so the building was designed to fit within the boundaries. However, a new site was eventually settled on that did not have such space constraints, but President Franklin Roosevelt liked the pentagonal design because it reminded him of old-style star-shaped fortifications from the 18th and 19th centuries. Ground was broken on the building in September 1941, and the speed of construction was ramped up after the US entered World War I following the attack on Pearl Harbor in December. Steel was in short supply, being needed to make weapons for the war effort, so construction was done using reinforced concrete, with over 650,000 tons of sand being dredged up from the nearby river to mix with the cement. The steel shortage also explains why ramps were built instead of elevators throughout the building. The local contractors ensured that the new construction complied with Virginia's segregation laws, building identical bathrooms next to each other that were supposed to be separate facilities for white and black employees. However, when President Roosevelt toured the site in 1942, he was unimpressed and ordered the whites-only signs be taken down. When the governor of Virginia complained to the president about this, he replied that although the Pentagon was in Virginia, it was federal property and was to be staffed by federal employees and not beholden to Virginia law. Roosevelt got his way, and for 20 years the Pentagon was the only building in Virginia where segregation laws were not enforced. The unique twin bathrooms remained, but have been used by everyone since they were built. Construction was completed in January 1943, a remarkable feat of engineering, especially considering the drain on manpower and materials imposed on the construction by the war. The building was a behemoth, too, over 6.5 million square feet of floor space, by far the largest office building in the world. It was also incredibly efficient. Since you could cut across the central courtyard, it was possible to get anywhere within the Pentagon from anywhere else in less than 10 minutes of walking, much faster than if the building had been rectangular shaped. The Pentagon was occupied by the War Department for the remainder of the Second World War. When the war ended, President Harry Truman proposed reorganizing the armed forces of the United States into a more streamlined command structure. This was realized in 1947 when the Army, Navy, and newly created Air Force were placed within the new Department of Defense. As the biggest and newest building the armed forces had, it only made sense that the whole command structure be located in the Pentagon. Today, the Pentagon houses 25,000 military and civilian employees of the Department of Defense, including the Secretary and Deputy Secretary of Defense, presidents, the secretaries of the Army, Navy, and Air Force. The Joint Chiefs of Staff, the highest-ranking military officers of each branch of service, also have their offices in the Pentagon. The command and control structure for the entire United States military is all located in this one massive building, including the National Military Command Center, which is where the President of the United States and the Secretary of Defense would run a war should one break out. It is also where the famous red telephone that connects Washington to Moscow, which is today actually a computer link that allows email communication, is located, and it is where the presidents would give the orders to launch America's nuclear arsenal, should that ever become necessary. The place is practically a self-contained city. Located within its 2 below-ground floors are all manner of shopping facilities, including restaurants, coffee shops, 3 different banks, a pharmacy, a jeweler, a florist, hair and nail salons, a dry cleaning service, a post office, and a Virginia Department of Motor Vehicles branch. You can do everything from see a dentist to rent a movie without ever having to leave the grounds of the Pentagon. In the center of the Pentagon complex is a 5-acre courtyard, well-manicured lawns, gardens, and big trees that remind visitors of being in a public park. It is a good place to take a break from the stressful work of running the American military and get some fresh air. In the middle of the courtyard is a cafe known colloquially as Ground Zero, a bit of dark humor referring to the fact that if the Pentagon was ever targeted by a nuclear missile, the cafe would likely be the bullseye of the resulting explosion. By the time of the Vietnam War, the Pentagon was already being viewed as more than just an office building. It was seen as a symbol of American military power, both at home and abroad, and because of the important role it played in organizing and overseeing the conflict in Southeast Asia, it was a natural target for protesters against it. On October 21, 1967, a large anti-war demonstration saw 100,000 people pack the National Mall around the Lincoln Memorial to hear speeches by luminaries including Dr. Benjamin Spock and civil rights activist and future Georgia Congressman John Lewis. This crowd was then led on a protest march across the river to the steps of the Pentagon. The crowd is believed to have been numbered somewhere between 35 and 50,000. They were stopped by a human barricade of soldiers from the famed 82nd Airborne Division who held the protesters back at bayonet point. These protesters were the original flower children and trying to demonstrate their commitment to peace by sticking flowers inside the barrels of the soldiers' guns. Some protesters attempted to break through to get inside the building, and the whole thing threatened to devolve into a riot. Soldiers and US Marshals deployed tear gas, and some protesters were clubbed with rifle butts. The drama was over by midnight, but the march on the Pentagon marked a dramatic escalation in violent standoffs between anti-war demonstrators and government authorities that would come to a head in the 1970 Kent State shootings, in which National Guard troops fired into a crowd of protesters at a university in Ohio, killing 4 students. This would not be the last time the Pentagon would come under attack from anti-war protesters. On May the 19th, 1972, a bomb exploded in the 4th floor women's restroom of the Air Force wing of the building. No one was hurt, but the blast caused an estimated $80,000 worth of damage, and the resulting flooding destroyed computer tapes that held classified information. The bomb was placed by a member of Weather Undergrounds, the radical left-wing group that was associated with militant opposition to the war in Vietnam and what they called American imperialism worldwide. The group also bombed the Capitol building and the US State Department headquarters during that same period. By the 1990s, the Pentagon was beginning to show its age. In the 50 years that had passed since its construction, the way business was done had been completely transformed by new technology. The building predated the advent of personal computers, fax machines, and video teleconferencing, and had originally been designed with only one analog telephone for every 3 employees. As time went on, the occupants of the various offices simply added whatever new technology they needed to do their jobs on top of the existing systems, creating an unplanned hodgepodge of internal infrastructure that simply wasn't sustainable. The building itself was also out of date. The building had been designed with air conditioning and had been constructed with multiple dangerous materials, including asbestos, that has since been banned. The office space had become cramped and inefficient. Plumbing and electrical systems were out of date and not in compliance with modern fire code, and the building needed both elevators and escalators installed to facilitate ease of movement throughout the massive building. What was needed was an almost complete redesign of the internal structure of the building without touching the exterior walls. The Pentagon renovation project, PenRen, began in 1998 with one side of the building, or Wedge, being completely cleared out, staff being moved to temporary office space located off-site, and the entire vacated section being gutted and remodeled. Following the completion of Wedge 1, the PenRen project would systematically move around the building, renovating each wedge in turn until completed. The entire remodel was expected to take 15 years to complete, but But an unexpected event would throw the entire schedule into disarray and call into question the future of the Pentagon itself. On September the 11th, 2001, at about 9:35 in the morning, the entire Pentagon was on high alert. Most everyone in the building knew by then that 2 hijacked airliners had crashed into the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center in New York City, and many people were probably watching the live coverage of the burning buildings on TV. Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld was in his office in the Pentagon overseeing the initial military response to the ongoing crisis. Suddenly, the entire building shook violently as though hit by an earthquake. But the reality was far more horrible. The third hijacked plane, American Airlines Flight 77, had just slammed into the west side of the Pentagon, flying at over 500 miles an hour. This instantly disintegrated the aircraft and sent a fireball 200 feet into the sky. The plane pulverized the outer wall of the building, penetrating as far as the third ring, more than 300 feet inside. The jet fuel explosion set off fires around the impact zone that eventually reached a temperature of 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Many people inside the Pentagon rushed to the scene of the crash and began administering first aid to the injured. They were soon joined by an army of firefighters from Arlington, Alexandria, and Washington, D.C., who worked tirelessly to battle the ongoing blaze and search the rubble for survivors. The reinforced structure posed a problem for firefighters. Wood used to support the roof was burning, spreading along either side of the place where the plane had hit, and firefighters were unable to get to it. They eventually resorted to making fire breaks, purposefully destroying sections of the Pentagon to stop the further spread of the fire. Less than an hour after impact, first responders were forced to evacuate the building when a huge section of the upper floors collapsed, creating a hole in the building 95 feet wide and 50 feet deep. Even while the fires were still raging, Secretary Rumsfeld was continuing to work in his Pentagon office. When it was suggested that operations be moved off-site, Rumsfeld refused and, in an evening press briefing, claimed that the Pentagon was still functioning. In fact, most workers in non-damaged sections of the buildings returned to work as usual the next day. A total of 189 people were killed in the crash and fires at the Pentagon. The 64 people on board the plane, including 5 hijackers, never stood a chance. They were killed instantly, their bodies found in small fragments, if they were found at all. A further 125 people within the Pentagon were killed, 70 civilians and 55 members of the military. Military personnel killed or injured in the attack were considered to be casualties of war and were awarded the Purple Heart Medal, just as they would have been if they'd been in combat. The dead included Lieutenant Timothy Maud, the U.S. Army's Deputy Chief of Staff Personnel, who was the highest-ranking military officer killed in action since World War II. The death toll might have been much higher, but for the fact that the plane happened to strike the one section of the Pentagon that had already mostly been renovated by the Penn project. The renovations included enhanced fire suppression systems and steel reinforcement to the internal structure of the building to withstand bomb blasts, which prevented an instantaneous collapse of the upper floors of the damaged section and gave workers enough time to evacuate. The newly installed blast-resistant windows held up during the impact, and they didn't shatter, preventing injuries from flying glass as seen in the bombings in Oklahoma City and Nairobi. Because the renovations were still ongoing, only 800 people were in the section of the Pentagon at the time, far less than the 4,500 that usually worked there, which certainly reduced the total number of victims. It was initially estimated that it would take 3 years to rebuild the damaged section of the Pentagon. The contractors already hired to do the renovation work were given the additional job of repairing the damage to the building, which was called Project Phoenix. The contractors went to work with what was described as patriotic fervor, with the goal of having the damage completely repaired and reopened to employees by the first anniversary of the attack. Workers completely demolished the damaged portions of the outer structure and replaced them with identical materials so that there would be no visible seam in the building to scar it. All the new features so recently installed in the renovation were replicated. Project Phoenix finished ahead of schedule, reopening for business only 11 months after the plane struck the building. The disaster also gave the Penn project additional ideas for improvement. Metro and bus terminals were moved further away from the Pentagon as a security measure, and nearby roads were diverted in an arc around the building so that it wouldn't be possible for a car or truck bomb to get close to it. A new shipping and receiving center was built to provide a secure place for deliveries to the Pentagon, again with the goal of not allowing vehicles to get too close to the structure. An outdoor Pentagon memorial was dedicated on the 7th anniversary of the attack in 2008 with 184 benches, each engraved with the name of a victim on it. Penn was completed in 2010, 4 years ahead of schedule, even allowing for the extra time needed to rebuild the wrecked section from the attack. The Pentagon is now considered completely up to modern standards for an office building while still maintaining its place on the National Register of Historic Places with its historic facade. In addition to the structural improvements, a new gym and library were also built to better serve the employees that work in the building every day. Tours of the building have been offered to visitors in the past, though these have been suspended due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The Pentagon continues to remain a lightning rod for controversy and dissent. It is common in military parlance to refer to decisions and instructions made by senior military officials as coming from the Pentagon, just as an order from the president is said to have come from the White House. In this way, the building itself is so closely associated with the work contained within it that it will be impossible to separate one from the other. With this in mind, it makes sense that when a group of 15,000 protesters organized in Washington, D.C. in 2007 to voice their disapproval with the ongoing Iraq War, they ended their march in front of the Pentagon, evoking the spirit of the anti-war demonstrations from 40 years before. Unlike those protests, however, this one ended peacefully. While there hasn't been a major terrorist incident at the Pentagon since September the 11th, the building's status as a symbol of American military power has inspired some violent incidents perpetrated by lone wolf offenders. In 2010, a man approached a security checkpoint at the Pentagon metro station, pulled out a gun and opened fire, wounding 2 police officers before being killed in an exchange of gunfire. The man had expressed extremist views online about the American government, including the military, being too large and tyrannical. On August the 3rd, 2021, in an incident still being investigated at the time we're making this video, a mentally disturbed man got off a bus near the Pentagon and attacked police officer George Gonzalez, fatally stabbing him before being shot to death by other officers. Gonzalez is one of 2 Pentagon police officers to be killed in the line of duty. In the 80 years since the Pentagon was built, it has gone from being a mere office building to something more. The nerve center of the entire United States military is run out of this unique 5-sided building. In fact, in a major crisis such as a war, all the essential functions of government can be conducted there. But it is perhaps more important as a symbol of the power and might of the US defense apparatus, just as the World Trade Center was a symbol of American commerce. Being such a symbol makes it vulnerable to another attack, but it is believed that with the lessons learned from September the 11th, that a similar tragedy won't happen again, and the Pentagon will continue to be a home base for the Department of Defense for decades to come, America's modern military fortress. So I really hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you again to Conflict of Nations for sponsoring. Remember, if you want to jump into their grand strategy game, use the link in the description below.
Okay, quite a hefty little segment there. Yeah, I feel like the other topic is gonna go a bit better today. This is a bad... The combination of these unique topics and me being behind today... Stuff like this calls for research. It's so much easier to do the news. That's why the podcast is primarily news. It's just so much easier. This stuff takes some thought. It takes a little bit of planning. But, there's a little introduction about the Pentagon. I really feel like I don't know that much about the Pentagon. My cousin worked at the Pentagon during 9/11, and when we saw what happened, we spent days trying to get in contact with him. It turns out he was on vacation for a few days. We were so relieved when we found out. Sounds like your cousin was tipped off, buddy. Okay. What do we got next? Why the Pentagon keeps failing its audit. Sure. Hopefully this isn't boring.
Failed another audit, but
CNBC.
with an expected $770 billion budgeted for the Defense Department in fiscal year 2022, keeping track of all this money is no simple matter.
It took the Department of Homeland Security a decade to pass its audit, and it's a fraction of the size of the Defense Department.
Old systems for tracking funds, a slow bureaucracy, and the sheer size of the U.S. defense apparatus have kept audits from passing since they began in late 2017.
We need to impose some kind of a penalty.
Personally, I would like to spend as little in the military as possible while achieving the important national security goals that the country has and that the people expect from the country.
After 4 straight failures, why does the Department of Defense struggle to pass an audit?
Let's audit it. Let's audit. Wrinkles, no. No.
The Department of Defense is responsible for defending U.S. interests around the world. Since 1988, the budget has grown from over $634 billion to over $724 billion in 2020. but the defense budget as a percentage of the total gross domestic product has actually dropped in the same period from 5.7% to 3.5%.
Like any organization in America, any large organization anyway, the single biggest expense on the balance sheet is people, and it's no different for the Defense Department.
The size of the budget is constantly a subject of debate, but for lawmakers to make informed decisions, they need good data.
The financial systems that you have in DoD right now are set up to control taxpayers' dollars, to guarantee that there is not going to be unauthorized use of it. So every use, every dollar and cent is accounted for. You can see that by the ADA violations being extremely low.
It is one of the largest organizations on planet Earth, right? $750 billion, direct payroll, 3 million people. Congress has plenty of data on the department, but they don't have useful data, and they don't have visualized, content that's helpful to them to do their oversight job.
They're responsible for the security of the United States. If in fact their audit systems are outdated, if in fact they can't do an audit and give us a picture of what they're spending, I kind of worry about what they're doing on the really important stuff as it relates to terrorism, as it relates to our national security issues over there at the Pentagon.
One of the main problems with the Department of Defense's accounting stems from the older methods still used today to track and organize funds.
There is a myth out there that just because the department can't pass the audit, it doesn't know where it's spending its money, and it does. But what it doesn't do well is track it at an enterprise level.
One example of items found in the recent audit was that the Navy found a warehouse with $126 million in aircraft parts that was not accounted for, according to the Government Accountability Office. It's items like this one that make some critics ask if the Pentagon's overall budget could be more focused and efficient.
What you have right now is a Pentagon that is everything for everyone. The DoD is trying to heal cancer and heal planet Earth at the same time. And it's always tacking on more missions. It's the matter of efficiency is what are you making it efficient for?
The umbrella of services under the Department of Defense, such as the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, and the Marines, along with other agencies and offices, creates layers of financial bureaucracy and differing methods of achieving similar goals.
Individually, some of the services are better than others. So the Marine Corps has passed a clean audit. So, I think we will continue to see that kind of progress, and Congress should expect that. But secondly, even just going through the whole process of reorienting the culture in the department to have a clean sheet audit has contributed to its own set of benefits. So for example, the Army used to laboriously input property and asset transfer documents into a system essentially by hand. By bringing in more people into the audit process, the Army was able to automate that and save 60,000 man hours a year. That's great, small, but great, important steps that I want to continue to see.
Some members of Congress have tried to institute a penalty for a failed Pentagon audit.
Maybe they just don't want to do it because they're misspending tax dollars. And that's why I introduced the Audit the Pentagon Act of 2021.
The Audit the Pentagon Act lays out a punitive system where a failed audit can result in a budget drop, and repeated failures increases this sort of penalty. The bill was introduced by Democratic Representative Barbara Lee and is co-sponsored in the House by Republican Representative Michael Burgess. It is also sponsored in the Senate by Senator Bernie Sanders. But even with bipartisan support, it has not managed to get much traction in Congress. The Pentagon is also where discretionary resources live, which is how some priorities can be funded without going through Congress directly, such as when President Trump redirected funds from the DoD to border wall construction.
Both parties are to blame on that. Since DoD is where the bulk of the discretionary resources live, it goes to that old joke, like, why do people rob the bank? Because that's where the money is. So if you want to fund your pet project, you go to DoD because that's where the money is.
After the withdrawal from Afghanistan, some questioned why defense spending wasn't slated to drop.
So the Defense Department has two budgets. They have sort of the standing professional force and what it costs to train, equip, and feed them, essentially. And then there is this conflict and contingency money. And that's usually on the credit card, right? It's usually debt finance, so to speak, and it's off the books, separate from the standing defense budget, which you maintain for sort of global stability, deterrence against China, et cetera. When operations end anywhere, yes, spending should go down. The challenge is explaining to the American people that it goes down on something that was debt financed anyway, and so the base defense budget doesn't really fall much.
Another issue is incorrect payments or payments that should not have been made for travel and expenses, which constituted $11.4 billion in misallocated funds. Part of the blame for this is the antiquated travel payment systems, and another factor is the sheer number of people processing requests. The Department of Defense's budget has trended up as a percentage of GDP since 2018, and with competition with China and Russia heating up, it likely isn't going to trend down anytime soon.
The Pentagon understands that members of Congress are fearful of doing anything because they believe that they would appear as being soft on national security, when in fact it's just the opposite. We want resources to support our troops, to provide a better quality of life for them.
Despite all of the problems, the audits have shown progress. The Department of Defense has stated that business reform efforts have resulted in $37 billion in savings from 2017 through 2021.
I believe the department will get that clean sheet audit. It's just going to be probably another half decade or so. So better use of member time is to focus on that enterprise level of oversight, to push the department into the 21st century, right, of commercial technologies and data analytics and other kinds of AI and other software tools that can help the department better explain what it does, not just track what it does.
There needs to be a good understanding between Congress and DoD on what is oversight, what is the information that you need, what are the proper financial data that you require. Does it need to be a snapshot, or can it be a live information for a quarter? And those things can be talked and negotiated between the two organizations. That's why there are quarterly O&M reports, for instance, that Congress receives. Could those be replaced with, an access to the system that congressional staffers can view the system but not modify, for instance? Those are the type of conversations that need to take place to assure that DoD financial systems are responsive to congressional and congressional needs and to the transparency required to operate in a democratic society.
Okay, Grinkles. Wrinkles keeps hopping up for every freaking news segment we watch. Come on, Footy. Go, 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 go. Okay. All right. It's unreal to me that a government agency can't pass an audit when it's got so much money to account for. If a publicly traded company didn't have its reporting audit documents available for shareholders, then it would be in a lot of trouble very quickly. How can a department have trillions of dollars to defend a country and not have an accurate record of what its assets and what it's spending? Cool. And then last but not least, we got defense.gov, the Pentagon website. 7 big things to know about the Pentagon. The Pentagon is a universal symbol of U.S. strength and security known around the world, but do you know the history behind it? It was supposed to be temporary. Yeah, I think a lot of stuff in our government was supposed to be temporary. The Pentagon was the brainchild of Army Brig General Brehon B. Somerville, who in the early 1940s pitched it as a temporary solution to the then War Department's critical shortage of space as the threat of joining World War II became imminent. The plan was approved, and on September 11th, interesting, 1941, construction began. Really? It was built on September 11th. Interesting. It started construction then. About 296 acres of land were designated for the building, which was supposed to be turned into a hospital, office, or warehouse once World War II was over. Why make it a pentagon shape? Who cares? An incredible amount of workers and materials brought it together. The grounds and building went up in a stunning 16 months. The building was officially completed in January 1943. Thanks to the help of 1,000 architects and 1,400 tradesmen, 14,000 tradesmen, who worked 3 shifts around the clock. A staggering amount of materials were needed too, including 435,000 yards of concrete, 43,000 tons of steel, 680,000 tons of sand and gravel. The first tenants moved into the building in April 1942, several months before the building was finished. Temporary needs quickly became permanent. At the height of World War II, the Pentagon housed more than 33,000 people, and its worth exceeded expectations. Officials discovered that they did, in fact, need to keep such a large military force active once the war was over. So instead of turning the building into something else, it remained the military's command center. Nowadays, it houses the Office of the Secretary of Defense, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and the highest echelons of the Army, Navy, Marine Corps, and Air Force. In 1992, the building was designated a National Historic Landmark. Due to its age, renovations began around that time on the building's 4 million square feet of space. The ongoing renovations likely saved lives in 9/11. Okay. Post 9/11 renovations continued for a decade. There were challenges. Even before the terrorist attacks, the renovations were considered a massive undertaking, which included removing all hazardous materials, replacing all building systems, adding new elevators and escalators to improve vertical circulation, yada, 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 this, that, the other. All right, you made it fancier. Good job. Okay, gang. Well, we learned maybe a little bit about the Pentagon. It just seems like for some of these topics, it's like, oh, the Pentagon. Wow, we're really going to get to the bottom of it. We're going to figure out once and for all what the Pentagon is all about. We got a brief history of the Pentagon, learned a little bit about their struggle to be audited, and then we took a look at their website. Yeah. Pentagon, there you go. Maybe someday we'll get to the bottom of it, but not today. I want some Kit Kats and Tic Tacs. Okay. Moving on to the uneasy relationship between the CIA and the mob. Mafia's Greatest Hits, American Heroes Channel. And are we going to get in trouble here? Catch Mafia's Greatest Hits Saturdays on the American Heroes Channel. Is that on TV, guys? American Heroes Channel? Subscribe to American Heroes Channel. American Heroes Channel. It's 4 minutes. Fuck it.
On New Year's Day, 1959, Fidel Castro's rebel forces sweep into Havana and, with popular support, expel the mob-friendly regime of Cuban dictator Fulgencio Batista. Castro swiftly nationalizes land and American businesses. He costs the mob and the U.S. government untold millions of dollars.
The mob, they were running this Cuba. They were running amok down there under Batista. And when Castro came in, he threw them all out. So they were not happy with him. If they could get rid of Castro, they could move back in.
And it isn't just the mob that wants Castro gone. The CIA sees Castro as a dangerous communist on America's doorstep and would like nothing more than to see him gone.
So who would you go to? You go to mob guys who had good connections in Cuba. They'd operated there for years and are pretty good at killing people.
The CIA secretly meets with Giancana and associates, hoping to arrange a gangland hit on Cuban dictator Fidel Castro.
They're certainly naive about the organized crime. They're not a hit squad. You can't buy them to kill people. They thought they could.
I don't know why I find that funny, dude. Are we hood? Are we good? What is that? Streams current bit rate. Okay, nobody cares about the bit rate. The CIA was naive about how the mob works. I find that funny, but I'm having trouble explaining why. Just the CIA sits down with the mob. It's like, we would like to pay you to kill somebody. It's like, what the hell do you think this is? hey, what do you think this is? Some sort of a fucking spook charity? It's like, I don't know. You guys are criminals. Just take this money and kill this guy. That's what you do, right? You're the bad guys. All right, moving on.
At a meeting at the Fontainebleau Hotel in Miami, the CIA suggests a Capone-style attack, with Castro going down in public in a hail of bullets. The real-life gangsters object, wanting to keep things nice and clean. Giancana suggests something more clandestine, using pills to poison Castro's food and drink. The CIA takes his advice, but the plan hits a wall when they start to see the true cost of doing business with the mob.
And once you've dealt with them and they've given you something, then they have a right to ask for something back. And you don't want a reciprocal relationship with them. You're compromised.
The CIA want Giancana to work for them, but suddenly find themselves working for him. Master manipulator Giancana is now using the CIA partnership to his advantage. Giancana suspects Phyllis McGuire is having an affair in Las Vegas with top showbiz comedian Dan Rowan. He talks his CIA contacts into planting a microphone in Rowan's hotel room. But the operation goes terribly wrong when the agents planting the bugs are discovered by hotel staff and are arrested. The CIA fears the mob connection and Castro assassination plot will now get out.
The agency did not want that plotting to come public, and they were afraid to death of any public examination of Giancana.
To avoid a public trial, a deeply embarrassed CIA Director of Security, Sheffield Edwards, confesses the whole sordid affair in a memo to the FBI. And when Bobby Kennedy learns of the plot, he is furious.
And he called Sheffield Edwards in to his offices. And what he said was, the next time you do something like that, you talk to me first.
All right. A little interesting snidbit there. So the CIA reached out to the mob to try to put out a hit on Castro. And lately I've heard some little whisperings that maybe the CIA kind of did the same thing when they were going for a JFK. Sometimes the government, CIA, and the mob share the same bed. Real. Let's see if there's angry shills in here. Well, that's what it takes sometimes, bucko. Tell me, son, on a scale of 1 to 10, how American would you say you are? Sometimes they're the same people. Skitty. Well said. Sometimes the CIA runs them. Real. Thumbs up. Real. Yes, how unprofessional for the CIA to work with the mobsters. Real. They're professional assassins. Real. Salvatore Munisam Giancana, better known as Sam Giancana, was a Sicilian-American mobster notable for being boss of the Chicago outfit from 57 to 66. Among his other nicknames were Momo, Sam the Cigar, and Sammy. Fun fact, Castro was still alive when this video was uploaded. Hello, American heroes. I really want to watch Triggers, but can't find the full episodes on their website. Oh, what? As if the CIA and mob didn't already have connections. Exactly. It goes back many years before that. And that's kind of what we're trying to learn about right now. I didn't see that much info on YouTube. I took a quick look at BitChute. This is a topic that I'd love to dive deeper into, is CIA and mob connections. And it's interesting, they're making it sound like, CIA is trying to play the mob, but then maybe the mob plays the CIA. I genuinely would be curious who was more powerful, and I'm a little bit curious about what the mob does today. Yeah, I'd like to do more research on the mob in general. I got some interesting perspectives in Vegas. I was talking to somebody on the phone, like, well, I hear that the mob runs Vegas, and they're like, the mob used to run Vegas, and it was actually better. So maybe sometimes the CIA and the mob are kind of like competing for territory, and one can only speculate about their relationship. Not really, though. I'm sure there's some good info out there. How the Mafia and U.S. military collaborated in World War II. Okay. U.S. military in World War II, I imagine spooks are a part of that. Let's go. Simple history.
Hey there, listen up. Although we're looking at the Mafia in World War II in this video, let's not forget that the U.S.
All right, let's turn this down a little bit.
been grappling with the criminal underworld from the Prohibition era of the 1920s. Today, we're working with Paradox Interactive to show you their new game, Empire of Sin. Build up your bootlegging empire in Prohibition-era Chicago. Pick one of 14 historical mob bosses such as Al Capone, Stephanie St. Clair, or Goldie Garneau, and form your gang of casinos. Empire of Sin now. Rated with the U.S. military in World War II. On July 10, 1943, Allied troops began landing on the southern coast of Sicily. Operation Husky began with the aim of conquering the island and establishing a base for future operations on the Italian mainland. This was to be the first step in penetrating Hitler's fortress in Europe. The operation was an enormous project. Never in the history of warfare has one force carried out such a large amphibious operation. In order to conquer the island, the Allies needed to surprise the enemy and, more importantly, be quick enough in reaching the northernmost tip of the island before enemy reinforcements could arrive. To do this, they needed a formidable knowledge of the terrain and the infrastructure, and if possible, gain support of the friendly local population. The United States Office of Naval Intelligence at the time lacked the infrastructure to gather valuable information about the island. That was why they decided to make a pact with an unusual ally, one that knew everything about the island, the Sicilian Mafia. The Mafia had long been the de facto rulers of Sicily. They controlled almost the entire life of the island, from trade to politics. Such a situation lasted until the early 1920s, when the fascist regime rose to power in Italy. As enemies of the state within the newly proclaimed order, the Mafia were exposed to severe persecution.
Yeah, so I've heard that before. Italian fascism kind of BTFO'd the mob a little bit. Is that a good thing? Maybe. Fascism based, anybody?
The state within the newly proclaimed order, the Mafia were exposed to severe persecution by the Iron Perfect, Caesar Mori, who was directly appointed by Mussolini to complete this task. Chief Mafia leaders were either arrested or were forced to withdraw to remote areas of the island, far from the reach of police. After only a few years, the island was relieved from Mafia control. This success earned Mussolini applause from the entire world, especially from the United States. In the United States, there was also a fight against the Mafia going on, even though organized crime was publicly denied. The Mafia was established in the States in the years between two world wars, when the American East Coast attracted enormous masses of Italian immigrants. 500,000 of them were Sicilians, who brought not only their customs and culture, but also criminal organizations. Over the years, this organization spread and established its control over the majority of illegal businesses on the East Coast. The strongest was the organization in New York, led by Charles Lucky Luciano. As head of the National Crime Syndicate, Luciano was tried in 1936 and sentenced to a long-lasting imprisonment of 30 to 50 years after his conviction for compulsory prostitution. And on the 18th of June 1936, he was sent to New York State's maximum security prison at Dannemora. It didn't prevent the Mafia, however, from continuing to work swimmingly. In the first several months upon entering the war, the United States started to suffer significant losses in merchant ships due to the increased activity of German submarines in the Atlantic. Some of the U-boats were operating as close as the New York harbor. The U.S. government feared that enemy activity was being aided by immigrants coming from an Axis nation, precisely Italian Americans. Frequent dock worker strikes at the time provoked the government to believe that something suspicious was going on. The suspicions grew stronger when, on February 9, 1942, the USS Lafayette, a former French SS Normandy ocean liner converted into a troop carrier, caught on fire at New York Harbor, where it was docked. American authorities suspected sabotage and conducted an investigation. The problem was that the dock workers were under control of the Mafia and were reluctant to speak out. There was, simply, no way to break their code of silence. Desperate to discover if the country was threatened by saboteurs, the Office of Naval Intelligence approached the Mafia for help, namely its leader, Lucky Luciano, and this began the aptly named Operation Underworld. After the war, the Navy strongly rejected all claims that any kind of arrangement was made, but at the time Luciano was transferred to Great Meadow, a lower security level prison, and then the dock strikes suddenly stopped. Confronted with intelligence gathering issues prior to the invasion of Sicily, the Office of Naval Intelligence approached the Mafia again in the spring of 1943. The task was assigned to Commander Charles R. Haffenden, in command of the newly formed F Section of the 3rd Naval District in New York. This time, Lucky Luciano and other New York mobsters were asked to bring in people from the old country, able to provide data about the island. This included information such as the structure of terrain and beaches, coastline shape, coastal waters, and other information valuable for troops invading unknown territory. They also provided knowledge on local customs and political and economical situations on the island. Hundreds of Sicilian immigrants were brought to the Office of Naval Intelligence. Their statements were used to create a detailed map of Sicily, filled with information that was more than helpful for Allied troops on the ground. More important for the Allies was the information about the Mafia leaders in Sicily that were willing to collaborate once the invasion began. Sicily was guarded by Italian and German troops. The fact that the Italian garrisons consisted mostly of Sicilian soldiers was seen as an advantage by the Allies. They believed the influence of the local Mafia leaders would convince citizens to help Allied troops, but also Italian soldiers to give up fighting. This would then turn the situation around and leave the Germans fighting in hostile territory. For the task, 4 intelligence officers from the 3rd Naval District, Lieutenant Anthony J. Marslow, Ensign James F. Murray, Lieutenant Joaquim Titolo, and Lieutenant Paul A. Alfieri, were sent from New York. They landed with the first assault wave and established a connection with the Mafia on the island on the very first day of the operation. Lieutenant Alfieri managed to locate a hidden villa, the headquarters of the Italian Naval Command, with the help of the Mafia. He stormed in and managed to steal valuable documents from the safe of the Italian admiral. Documents he provided showed the full disposition of the Italian and German naval forces and overlays of minefields in the entire Mediterranean Sea. This joint Navy-Mafia operation saved thousands of lives of Allied soldiers. As the invasion progressed, the job that was established by the Office of Naval Intelligence was taken by the OSS. The collaboration with the local Mafia proved to be more than valuable. They served as guides, helped put ports and other facilities back into work, and organized civilians for labor. In short, they helped MGOT, or the Allied Military Government of Occupied Territories, to take control over the island with ease. It came with a price, though. Being the only people they could trust, the Allied military authorities appointed key Mafia leaders as mayors of small towns across the island. Sicily was once again in the hands of the Mafia, and it not only affected the lives of the local population, but the military as well. The Mafia organized looting of army depots in order to supply the growing black market. It all happened with the tacit consent of the army. The Psychological Warfare Bureau is quoted as stating that certain Mafia groups made up to 65% of their income from stolen Allied supplies, and that of all the supplies and equipment brought into Italy, approximately 1/3 of this was lost to the black market. But the U.S. military saw the benefit of the arrangement with the Mafia as worthy of the chaos they created. After the war, the arrangement proved to be even more valuable in preventing the ascent of the communist movement on the island. Today, many historians believe that the story of the Allied-Mafia cooperation was exaggerated and full of myths. One such myth was about a U.S. Army airplane that had flown over the village of Villalba with a gold banner with a black letter L fluttering from the cockpit. This was supposed to be a signature of Lucky Luciano and an invitation to villagers to join the Allies. The Mafia boss from Villalba, Don Calogero Vizzini, welcomed the Allies and even joined them on their progress through western Sicily. The myth goes that the influence of Don Calo was crucial for the quick progress of U.S. troops through the region. Despite being very successful, cooperation with criminals was too much of a burden for the U.S. Navy and government. Despite all the testimonies of both Mafia and the officers engaged in collaboration, the U.S. Navy never publicly admitted that any kind of arrangement was made with the Mafia. After the war, Lucky Luciano's sentence was commuted on the condition that he didn't resist deportation for his parole to be completed in Italy. He died in 1962 in Naples from a heart attack, after living out the rest of his life as a free man.
Hey, so what? I work with the CIA. Forget about it. You tell that CIA man that I'm gonna make him an offer we can't refuse. Alright, somewhat interesting stuff here. Mafia, I'll make you an offer you can't refuse. U.S. government, deal. Mafia, wait, really? U.S. government, deal. So I'd really be interested to know, like, who's more powerful, the Mafia or the CIA? It's tempting to say CIA, but I don't know, man. Shit, maybe some people would try to make the argument that the Mafia runs the CIA. That's not what I think is going on, but it's bringing up a lot of questions. You know, if today's podcast can do anything positive, it's getting you in a mindset to ask a lot of questions, maybe make you hungry to dig into some of these things a bit deeper. What are you, a wise guy? Hey. Soldier, where were you shot? I ain't saying nothing, but the doctor needs to know where to treat you. Tell him to go suck a lemon. Hey. I may be a gangster, but I'm an American gangster. Lucky Luciano. All right. Well, we got quite a hefty article here. Yeah, even the cartels are afraid of the CIA. For real. I mean, that's what Wolfgang's all about, guys. Pointing fingers at the CIA. So that's what it is, baby. They got money. They got the intelligence. The CIA's got all the finest technology and funding all at their fingertips, man. Operation Mockingbird. They run the media. They've used all the fucking news in this country as just like a puppet. Like a puppet media program to just spread their narrative everywhere. They run this shit, boyos. Inside the CIA's plot to kill Fidel Castro with Mafia help. So that's what the first video was about. New details have emerged about a top-secret killing plan in the 1960s, the CIA's recruitment of 2 gangsters to murder Cuba's dictator. We'll read a little bit of this. Spies, sex, mafia hitmen, and James Bond-like killing devices. They sound like the stuff of an Ian Fleming novel or a movie thriller, but these are true-life details from America's first foray into the assassination business, a rather messy affair, as 007 might say. They can be found, many for the first time, in recently declassified files about the '63 assassination of President John F. Kennedy. The JFK files, released by the National Archives in batches since last year, have already been picked over for signs of any new information about Kennedy's death in Dallas. But far less noticed were the files' fascinating new insights about another much-debated Cold War conspiracy, a top-secret killing plan centered on the CIA's recruitment of gangsters Sam Giancana and Johnny Roselli to murder Cuba's young communist leader Fidel Castro. The conspiracy, including the mobsters' involvement in it and the CIA's oversight of it, has been known about for years. But the documents from the CIA, FBI, and other agencies, which had kept the files secret in full or in part for decades, provide several new details about the gangsters, their plot, and their friendship. Together, these sources paint the most comprehensive picture yet of America's first confirmed attempt at state-sponsored assassination of a foreign leader. The files reveal, for instance, the range of Guiacana's and Roselli's world of co-conspirators, including CIA spies and handlers, a fellow mafioso and former cop in Chicago, Castro's double agents in Miami, beautiful Hollywood women, Rat Pack entertainers like Frank Sinatra, a snooping J. Edgar Hoover, and zealously anti-communist White House officials. The documents also provide new details about the mobsters' violent schemes to kill Castro, which included everything from explosions and gunfire during midnight boat raids to hidden poisons prepared by the agency's lab. During the early 1960s, the CIA's quest to kill Castro turned southern Florida into a secret war zone and became a wild whack-a-mole hunt inside Cuba, all without luck. The ever-elusive despot died of old age in 2016. You know, we should do a podcast on Castro at some point. Although more JFK files are expected to be released through April, important questions about Guiacana and Roselli will likely remain unanswered, given the shadowy nature of this long-ago spy tale. Still, as further details emerge from the files, we can better trace the outlaw friendship of Guiacana and Roselli, the CIA's homicidal conspiracies against Castro, and how the Cuban leader reacted by setting up his own spy network around Miami. Like strands in a ball of yarn, these individual memos and documents unwind to reveal a complicated tale far greater than Americans ever realized at the time. In the scope of history, the Mafia spy scheme against Castro shows how easily U.S. espionage and law enforcement agencies were corrupted more than a generation ago, with government-sanctioned murder justified on claims of national security. But it also holds important lessons at a time when some Americans fear their trusted institutions could go astray. Yeah. Is that Young? Is that Carl Jung? Am I dumb? No, that's Duels. That's a CIA dude. The unholy marriage of the CIA and the Mafia. And the Castro plot first became public knowledge in the mid-1970s. Amid congressional hearings into the agency's misdeeds and a growing national paranoia about the JFK assassination. Not until 2007 did the agency finally admit that Alan Dulles, that's the guy in the picture next to Kennedy, its legendary director a half-century earlier had agreed to a sizable bounty for the two gangsters in exchange for Castro's head. But for more than a decade, the plot was known to only a few. The story begins in the late 1950s when America's post-war confidence was suddenly rattled by the Soviet Union, which adopted Castro's revolutionary government as a political satellite. By August 1960, the CIA's top leaders had launched their plan to get rid of the pesky young Castro, according to a 1967 Inspector General's report stamped "Secret Eyes Only." The policy to get rid of Castro had been initiated under President Dwight D. Eisenhower and was embraced by Kennedy when he took office in '61. Historians debate how much both presidents knew of the CIA's precise plans. Reluctant to get blood on their own hands, CIA officials called for a sensitive mission requiring a gangster-type action. Guiacana and Roselli, then at the height of their careers, controlled a multi-million-dollar mafia empire unprecedented in the annals of American crime. Arguably bigger than the five families of New York's L.A. or La Casa Nostra combined. Guiacana, the gruff, violent mob boss based in Chicago, dreamed of exporting his Midwest criminal enterprise to Latin America. And Roselli, known as Handsome Johnny for his movie star looks, served as the mob's smooth-talking man in Hollywood before overseeing its casinos in Las Vegas. The two began as young Turks for Al Capone's gang and, well before the CIA mission, had a history of working together, running gambling places in Cuba and Nevada, and exerting the mob's will in other ways. One amusing JFK file recalls how Roselli, a pal of movie studio tycoons, once collected a gambling debt from a delinquent actor as a favor to his Marx Brothers friends, Harpo and Chico. Another file details how Roselli took phone calls about his CIA scheme while relaxing at the Friars Club in Beverly Hills, where Sinatra sponsored his membership. Yeah, this article goes on and on and on and on and on. Let's go ahead and just read this last paragraph. Somewhere in this eloquent retort, an apologia for America's first attempts at state-sponsored assassination using mafia killers, there seemed a lasting lesson for all presidents. In addition to the Castro plot, 1970s congressional hearings showed evidence of CIA involvement in plots against Conglosi leader Patrice Lumumba and Rafael Trujillo in the Dominican Republic in the early 1960s. President Gerald Ford's 1976 ban on killing foreign leaders during peacetime loosened amid talk of targeted enemy drone killings and regime change in the post-9/11 era. And President Donald Trump, the man who approved the release of these JFK files, appeared unfazed last year when asked about political assassinations tied to Russian President Vladimir Putin. Instead, his answer almost seemed to refer to America's own history with men like Guaiana and Roselli. There are a lot of killers, Trump told Fox News. You think our country's so innocent? Besado! All right, guys. Well, this turned out to not be such a terrible podcast. We learned a little bit. We're learning, buddies, and that's all that counts. I got to go take my classic pee-pee. So, funny squirrels? Here we go. Have fun with the funny squirrels.
Come on. Oh, yeah. Got it. Oh, yeah. Look at this go. There we go. Round and round we go. Boy, he is hanging on for dear life. Oh, Lord, look at him go. He's going to set a world record for this one. He's trying to get his nose into the spout. Oh, this is too cool. Look at him go. Will he ever turn loose?
Well, let's finish up with this sweetie, Crystal Gonzalez. I know somebody with that exact same name. Crazy. 5 Christian parenting tips. How to raise godly children. Biblical Parenting 2020. Let's see if she's a boutie.
Hey, are you currently looking for some Christian parenting tips and advice on how to raise godly children in this crazy world we live in? Well, stick around because today I'm going to give you 5 tips on how to raise godly children. Coming right up. Okay, so before we get started, I'm going to go ahead and give you the Bible verse that is the foundation to my personal parenting strategy, and that is Proverbs 22:6. It says, Train up a child in the way he should go, teaching him to seek God's wisdom and will for his abilities and talents. Even when he's old, he will not depart from it. I love this Bible verse because it just really shows that if you teach your child the right way to grow up, loving God, learning his wisdom, and applying it to his life, he will grow up and keep that knowledge and wisdom that you instill in him. So the very first thing that I'm going to go ahead and talk about is prayer life. If you allow your child to see your own personal prayer life and even pray with your child over even like the littlest things, it really teaches him that his faith and relationship with God is so important and vital in his walk with God. So some of you might know that I have 3 children. I have a 5-year-old daughter, a 3-year-old son, and a 1-year-old son. And something that I like to do with them is whenever they're hurt or whenever they're really sad or something is going on, we pray. I like to pray with them and kind of just help them and guide them in learning how to pray for stuff. Now, we also pray over our food and we pray every single night before we go to bed. And so those are ways that you can help your child learn how to pray and how to build that relationship on their own with God. So the second thing that I recommend you doing is worshiping together as a family. I know sometimes, there's only that one day a week when you go to church on Sunday that you have your praise and worship. And sometimes if you don't do it at home, you might feel a little silly doing it in your living room or in your bedroom or wherever. But if you invite your children to do this with you, they will see you and watch you and do exactly as you do. I do praise and worship with my little ones at least 5 times a week. Definitely for sure throughout the weekday, sometimes more if we're at home on the weekend. I think it's so important to show your children how to truly worship God and be vulnerable and truly surrender yourself and sing to Him. And whenever they watch you do it, they start to understand what you're doing and why you're doing it. And I truly believe that this is something that is really going to build their faith and start to love God with all of their hearts. So now my third and fourth tip kind of go hand in hand because it all revolves around teaching your children Bible stories and truly the Word of God, teaching them that anything that is in this book is a double-edged sword. So whenever I teach them any kind of Bible stories, I make sure, especially with Dawson, he's my 3-year-old, to help him understand that this is a real story. These are true stories. These are things that God and Jesus really did. And it truly, it's so rewarding to see them so amazed at all of these things that God was able to do. And it really helps to build their faith. Now, why I say that goes along with tip number 4 is because I have this subscription box from Kids Faith Crate, and it's amazing. This teaches them so many different things that I don't think I would have ever been able to even figure out how to teach them. So I'm gonna go ahead and just open this up really quick and show you guys what's inside. So this is what the box looks like. It says a monthly subscription box to cultivate your child's faith. I love that. Okay, so it has a memory verse for your child to learn every month. And this is what all of your lesson plans are. So you basically get 1 lesson plan per week. So there's 4.
It looks like she's trying to sell us something. Yay.
Activities in the whole box for 1 whole month, and I love it. They're so detailed. So it shows you all of the different.
Let's see what's up with witchcraft.
Getting yourself a Kids Faith Crate, and I'll have the direct link down in the description below. So this very last tip might be extremely controversial, and you might have different opinions than me, but just know that these are all my own convictions, and these are things that God led me to realize. And even in the Word, it says we do not fight our battles of flesh and blood. So I truly believe, number 1, we should not allow any kind of witchcraft into our children's eyes, ears, souls, anything. We should not allow them to watch anything with witchcraft or be a part of it in any kind of way. And that's not to say that everything with magic in it is bad, because I do believe that, if a fairy is doing something, like if you look at Cinderella, there's a fairy godmother, I don't believe that is witchcraft, because I can easily tell my child that that doesn't exist. That is make believe. So there's so many, there's so many examples of things like that. So I'm saying that if there is something with a legit witch, so like Harry Potter, Shrek has witches in it, anything that has that kind of thing, like sometimes I feel like it's okay to skip over it if it's just a very small part. But if the sole purpose of...
Wait, Shrek has witches in it? What? Maybe one of the sequels. Who cares? The sequels suck anyway. Let's go Shrek. I don't think there's any witches in the first Shrek.
The movie or the show itself has to do with a witch, we do not watch it. In the Word of God, there's so many Bible verses that tells us to stay away from witchcraft. And it's crazy to see how many people just openly invite it in. Even, if you're a Christian, like, you should be very well aware that, witches are real. Witchcraft is very, very, very real. And so I had to really dig deep and find the perfect Bible verses to show you. And the first one is from Deuteronomy. Now, I know some of you out there may also be like, well, that's not New Testament. Well, I'm going to get to a New Testament one real soon. So we'll go ahead and read this one first. So we're looking at Deuteronomy 18:10. There shall not be found among you anyone who makes his son or daughters pass through the fire as a sacrifice, one who uses divination and fortune telling, one who practices witchcraft, one who interprets omens, or a sorcerer, or one who casts a charm or spell, or a medium, or a spiritist, or a necromancer, one who seeks the dead. Okay, so all that was kind of clear, right? Stay away from those things. But as I know some of you only believe in the New Testament and that, the Old Testament was, renewed and all that. But let me show you in the New Testament. Go to Galatians 5:19 through 21. So these verses say, the acts of the flesh are obvious: sexual immorality, impurity, and debauchery, idolatry, and witchcraft, hatred, discord, jealousy, fits of rage, selfish ambition, dissensions, factions, and envy, drunkenness, orgies, and the like. I warn you, as I did before, and those that live like this will not inherit the kingdom of God. And y'all, it's written plain and simple right there. We are not to partake in these things. Now, I understand if you do things unknowingly, but today you just learned that you should not knowingly sin in these areas, because you will not inherit the kingdom of God. Now, what is our main purpose for being a Christian? It is, number one, to fulfill God's purpose here on earth. Number two, to win as many souls for God as you can. And number three, it's that we may go to heaven and live an eternal life with God. Now, that is why I feel so strongly about taking this information and spreading the knowledge of, listen, hey, you probably should not be partaking in any kind of witchcraft, and that involves letting your children watch anything with witches in them, with any kind of spells, sorcery, wizards. All of those things are derived from the devil. You guys, it's so crazy. We do not fight this battle of flesh and blood. It is a spiritual battle that we fight. And whenever you allow witchcraft into your life, you are allowing the enemy to have that kind of dominion and the stronghold on.
It's everywhere, dude. As a drummer of over 20 years now, is that right? Yeah, I started when I was 11. I'm 31. I've played drums for 20 years now. Witchcraft is all over music. Like, music basically is fucking witchcraft. Like, it sounds so good. Bim, 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 bim. God is a woman. Got me swinging side to side. All this fucking pop music is trying to fill your head with absolute degeneracy and normalize it. There's witchcraft all over the place, bros. Very difficult to escape from. This battle has been very hard fought for Christians. I think about the documentary Jesus Camp, which really heavily turned me against Christianity in high school. Some of my earliest memories in regards to becoming an atheist was like, oh wow, Christians don't even let their kids watch Harry Potter. That's fucking stupid. Really? You can't watch Harry Potter? And it's like, now, as an adult, as an educated Christian, it's like, yeah, Harry Potter's witchcraft and wizardry. What do kids do after they watch Harry Potter? Wow, cool. I want to be a wizard like Harry. I mean, the way that atheists, they fucking got so many points. Atheists got so many points mocking Christians for not liking Harry Potter. And I just look back at it now and it's like, really? You just can't see that the Bible says that witchcraft and wizardry is bad, and that's what Harry Potter's all about? I mean, it's really not rocket science, man. It's just really crazy to look back on now, because for me in the 2000s, it was all fucking just common sense. Like, oh, wow, Christians are idiots. They worship a cutout of George Bush and the fucking Westboro Baptist Church. Of course, Michael brought up the Westboro Baptist Church, dude. If some liberal atheist brings up the Westboro Baptist Church, you know they got fucking brainwashed in the early 2000s by the likes of Comedy Central and Jesus Camp and all of that 2000s tier brainwashing. Like, who gives a shit about the Westboro Baptist Church, dude? Anyway.
On you. So I definitely advise stay away from witchcraft. Now, the next part about that is something that I don't want you to personally feel offended about, or, think I'm attacking you or judging you or anything like that. But I do not let my children celebrate Halloween. We actually tried it last year, and it was a horrible experience because, number one, my children were terrified. And the Word of God says that He did not give us that spirit of fear, but He gave us a spirit of faith. So why? I mean, I felt so bad. Like, I allowed the spirit of fear to come into my children. And that is one thing that God did not want me to do. And another thing is, this holiday, Halloween, is extremely evil. Witches celebrate this holiday. They call it, I think, Samhain or something like that. But it is extremely evil. And for us to have done it knowingly that we probably shouldn't have, it convicted me so hard. And it's something that God showed me that I do not need to be a part of. Now, I have a lot of friends and a family that actually celebrate it, and so I'm not trying to make you feel bad or anything. It's just something I had my own personal conviction about, and I would love for you to maybe do your own research or maybe pray about it as a family and see what God wants you to do. But I personally don't think that it was the best decision for me and my family, just because of how wicked it can be. Spooky is just a fancy word for scary. And how do you get scared? Spirit of fear. So that's exactly why we don't celebrate it. Now, I hope that you take all of this advice that I've given you today and that you truly start to ponder on it, pray.
Yeah, I've been watching some horror movies this month, and I find for the most part, I just don't really like them. My observation of horror movies is it's just kind of low vibrational. It's kind of smut. Watching a bunch of people die. It's negative. It's smutty. Lot of sex in the movies. A lot of it's just like goy slop, smut, low vibrational. Getting cozy, watching King of the Hill or one of your favorite comedy movies or some shit. That can kind of like put you in a happy state. That can lift you up. I just am naturally drifting away from horror movies at this point. So that's where I'm at.
About it, look it up yourselves. I want you guys to truly be the best Christian parents that you could possibly be, so that you could lead your children to Christ. I hope that you got something out of this video, and if you did, like this video, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel so that you can see more. But that's gonna be it for today, so I'll see y'all next time. Bye, y'all.
I'm not gonna act like I know everything about this chick. I will just make one point about women who may or may not be like this. Again, I don't really know what this girl's about completely. This girl's heart is in the right place, but where she could very well go wrong, and I'm not trying to be facetious here, I could see a woman like this trying to dominate her husband in a relationship, trying to kind of overpower what the father's about, trying to like overlead. Seems to me like she really wants to be a leader in the relationship. It's good. You want to find a Christian woman who is like this, but a woman who has these beliefs. She should gravitate toward a man who has a stronger philosophical, theological hold over these beliefs, and she should be open to correction. And, the father should definitely be open to collaboration in raising the kids. But she definitely needs to let the man take the reins and have the final say. But you want to find a good Christian woman who has these kind of values. Her heart is definitely in the right place. Well, I mean, I'm not going to make a bunch of negative accusations about her, guys. You know, she just sounds like maybe she's a little bit hungry to lead, but maybe not. Well, guys, that pretty much concludes our podcast for today. I think it ended up being all right, you know, a little bit about the Pentagon, a little bit about the CIA and the Mafia. Hearing out the sweetie about being a Christian parent. I think there's a lot of guys out there who would be excellent fathers today. And when it really comes down to, guys, you know, with the fucking beaten to dead MGTOW relationship stuff, is women are not selecting for fathers. Women are not selecting for strong fathers anymore. They're selecting for pretty boys, fuck boys. There has to be some sort of attraction, like, and, you know, not all women are like that, but a lot of guys out there with great values, strong leaders, will be raising great kids, and women just can't. Women won't give you the fucking time of day. It sounds like Bad Karma's a Fed, and he really wants us to know that. Okay, we get it, Bad Karma. You're a Fed. Is that what they pay you to do? To take the fucking Pokemon theme song and replace it with Fed instead of Pokemon Trainer? I want to be the very best Fed, like no one ever was. To fed them is my real test. To train them is my cause. I will travel across the land, searching far and wide, teaching feds to understand the power that's inside. Very good. America's finest, ladies and gentlemen. You did good, buddy. You're doing a good thing for America. Well, guys, no chill stream tonight. I just about want to take the entire weekend off of streaming. I'm very tentative after last Saturday. Last Saturday was a bad day for me. Bad day for the stream. I'm definitely not streaming tomorrow. Maybe Sunday. No streams tomorrow, guys. Not even a coffee stream. I'm gonna fucking like watch an episode of King of the Hill with my coffee or some shit. I need to make sure I keep it real this weekend. I need to make sure I stay in a positive mindset. I'm trying to force positivity. There's going to be a snowstorm tonight. I got to get super cozy. I haven't smoked weed yet today. I got to enjoy being high tonight. Let's all enjoy our lives, guys. Let's keep it positive. We're still in wacky times. I think our number one goal for the rest of the year is stay positive. Keep it going. Stay productive. I didn't work out today. I might get one of those 45-minute cardio sessions in while I watch a movie tonight. We're going to be all right. God bless you, my friends. Have a grand weekend. I think on Sunday we'll do a coffee stream, but give me Saturday, boys. I need to go into lockdown mode and make sure that this Saturday is cozy. No bad vibes. I love you guys. God bless you.